The Kunduz hospital airstrike. You're a surgeon. Your hands are inside someone's chest cavity, literally holding their heart. The room shakes. Once, twice. Then you hear it, the unmistakable whistle of incoming shells. Someone's bombing your hospital. October 3rd, 2015. Kunduz, Afghanistan. An American AC-130 gunship circled above a hospital run by Doctors Without Borders for 30 straight minutes. Not 30 seconds. 30 minutes. Long enough to watch an entire TV show. Long enough to know exactly what you're doing. Long enough to realize you're destroying a medical facility. 211 shells rained down, each one precisely targeted at hospital buildings. Patients burned alive in their beds. They couldn't move, couldn't escape, just waited for the flames to consume them. Doctors got their limbs blown off mid-surgery. Some were decapitated by shrapnel while trying to save someone's life. Medical staff ran through smoke-filled corridors trying to evacuate the injured. People ran from the burning building and got shot from the air. Imagine that. You survive the fire, make it outside gasping for air, and then bullets rain down from above. 42 dead when it was over. Doctors, nurses, patients. People who'd traveled across the world to save lives in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Among them were some of the best trauma surgeons working in active war zones. Now here's where it gets really messed up. The hospital had given the U.S. military their exact GPS coordinates days before. Hey, we're right here. Please don't bomb us. It was marked on every map. Everyone knew. Military planners had the coordinates in their systems. And during the attack, staff were on the phone with military officials, screaming, "We're a hospital! Stop shooting! People are dying!" The calls went through. Someone on the other end heard them begging, but the bombing continued for another 30 minutes anyway. Think about that. They knew what they were hitting and kept firing. The official story changed 3 times, which tells you everything. First, we were protecting troops under fire on the ground. Then, the Afghan army specifically requested the strike. Finally, yeah, it was us, but it was an accident. Human error, equipment failure, technical malfunction. Some officials claimed Taliban fighters were hiding in the hospital, using patients as human shields. Doctors Without Borders shut that down immediately. We have a strict no weapons policy. There were no fighters here, just doctors and dying patients. Obama apologized personally. 16 people got written up, letters of reprimand, suspensions, paperwork that goes in files, administrative actions, but nobody got charged with a war crime. Nobody went to prison. Nobody faced a court-martial. Pentagon said, since it was unintentional, it wasn't a war crime under international law. Doctors Without Borders and the UN demanded an independent investigation. A military can't investigate itself fairly. That investigation never happened. Case closed. World moved on to the next crisis. 42 people stayed dead. Their families got nothing but apologies. The Mahmudiyah killings. March 12, 2006, Iraq. 5 soldiers sat at their checkpoint, drinking whiskey mixed with Red Bull, playing cards. They'd been watching a 14-year-old Iraqi girl named Abir for weeks, watching her do chores in her garden, watching her take care of her little sister, watching her hang laundry, fetch water, live her life. Private Stephen Dale Green had told a reporter a month earlier that killing Iraqis felt like squashing an ant, said he came to Iraq wanting to kill people, said it felt like nothing to him. That day, they made a plan. They talked about raping Abir, killing her family. They discussed it like planning a grocery run, casual and matter-of-fact. 4 of them changed into civilian clothes and walked to her house in broad daylight. One stayed back at the checkpoint. He knew exactly what was happening. He was complicit through his silence. Inside the house lived Abir, 14, her sister Hadil, 6. Their parents Fakria and Qasim, 2 younger brothers, were at school, which saved their lives but cursed them forever. The soldiers separated everyone into different rooms with brutal efficiency. One grabbed the 6-year-old while she played outside. Another shot both parents and the little girl dead in cold blood. The mom fought desperately to protect her children. She fought so hard, both her arms broke before she died. Then Green and 2 others took turns raping Abir while another stood guard. When they finished, Green shot her in the head multiple times. They poured kerosene on her body and set her on fire to destroy evidence. Burned their bloody clothes in the flames. Threw the murder weapon in a canal. Then they walked back to the checkpoint and ate chicken wings like nothing happened, celebrating. The 2 younger brothers, 9-year-old Ahmed and 11-year-old Muhammad, came home from school that afternoon. Their house was burning, black smoke pouring into the sky. Everyone inside was dead. Just like that, in the time it takes to walk home, they were orphans. They'd lost everything. The soldiers blamed insurgents initially. Nobody investigated deeply for months. Case seemed closed. Then another soldier, Justin Watt, heard about it from other guys in the unit, bragging. He could have stayed quiet, could have protected his brothers in arms. Instead, he reported it, knowing his own guys might kill him for speaking up. That took real courage. Green got life in prison, killed himself later, escaping any further punishment. The others got 90 to 110 years, but eligible for parole after just 10 years with good behavior. The guy who covered it up and knew everything? 27 months, less than 2.5 years. So these guys could be walking free after 10 years for raping and murdering a child and slaughtering her family. Does that sound like justice? Tiger Force Atrocities. May 1967, Vietnam. Tiger Force was supposed to be elite, the best of the best. Small, fast, deadly. Highly trained reconnaissance unit. Commanders wanted high kill counts to report up the chain of command. One colonel literally ordered them to reach a specific number to match the unit's name. Get your numbers up. Make us look good. That created an environment where anything was acceptable. For 7 months, they went hunting, not for enemy soldiers, for anyone they could find. Old people executed in rice fields while begging for mercy, families hiding underground from the war, grenades thrown into bunkers where they sheltered, turning those spaces into mass graves, prisoners tortured for entertainment, then killed when they got bored. Soldiers cut off ears from corpses and wore them as necklaces, actual human ears strung together as jewelry, as trophies. Sammy Lee Barr and Ken Green were friends from Arizona who enlisted together. After Green died in battle, Barr completely lost it, started mutilating bodies, cutting them apart. Instead of punishment or removal from the field, a military newspaper actually congratulated him for getting the unit's 1,000th kill, like it was an achievement, like it was something to be proud of. But not everyone went along with the madness. Soldier Gerald Bruner actually pointed his rifle at another American to physically stop a killing. He was willing to shoot a fellow soldier to prevent murder. His commanders punished him for it, treated him like he was the problem, like he couldn't handle war. Others tried reporting the crimes to superior officers, got told to shut up and follow orders. One military journalist who documented what he saw was threatened with death by his own commander. Report this and you'll die. Medical staff suspected what was happening when they saw the bodies and wounds, but they were too scared to investigate because they knew what happened to people who asked questions. The culture of silence was absolute. Years later, the army actually did investigate after reporters started asking questions. 1971 to 1975, 4 full years of investigation. They got sworn statements from soldiers admitting everything in detail, found proof of routine murders, including the killing of 2 blind brothers just for sport, mountains of evidence, eyewitness testimony, confessions. The result? Nobody got punished. Not one single person faced consequences. By 1975, the war was ending, and America wanted to move on. The government was afraid of a massive scandal splashed across newspapers, afraid of damaging military morale even further. So they buried the files deep. Took decades for investigative reporters to dig up the truth and expose it. 7 months of continuous atrocities, 4 years of thorough investigation, mountains of undeniable evidence, 0 consequences for anyone involved. Kandahar Massacre, March 11th, 2012, Afghanistan. Families in 2 small villages went to sleep like any other night. Before dawn, Staff Sergeant Robert Bales left his base armed and ready, twice. He went out, came back, then went out again. That's not snapping. That's methodical. First trip to Alkozai village, under cover of darkness. 4 people dead, 6 wounded. Came back to base. Nobody stopped him, then left again. Second trip to Najiban village. 12 more dead, most from one family wiped out in a single night. Witnesses said he pulled people from their sleep, confused and terrified, and shot them in the head execution style. Dragged a woman from her home, beat her, did things so graphic we can't even say them here, gathered bodies in one room and set them on fire to cover evidence. 16 civilians dead by sunrise. 9 were children who never woke up. 11 victims came from the same family, nearly wiping them out completely. He walked back to base that morning, covered in blood. Other soldiers saw him. He looked at them and said simply, "I did it." No elaborate excuse, no claim of self-defense, no suggestion that he'd mistaken them for enemy combatants. Just, "I did it." Afghan officials immediately called it what it was: intentional, premeditated murder. Protests erupted across the country. People filled the streets demanding justice. The Afghan parliament demanded a public trial in Kabul under Afghan law. Made sense, right? Crime happened in Afghanistan. Victims were all Afghan civilians. Why shouldn't Afghan justice apply? U.S. Officials refused categorically. They insisted Bales would be tried under American military law in an American court. He was an American soldier, therefore subject to American military justice system. The message was clear: we handle our own, our way. Bales got life without parole, dishonorably discharged, reduced to lowest rank, stripped of everything. Finally, real consequences and real accountability. But wait, Bales got life for 16 civilians in 2012. The Mahmudiyah killers got minimum 10 years for raping and murdering a child and her family in 2006. Tiger Force got absolutely nothing for 7 months of atrocities. Kunduz hospital bombers got paperwork for 42 dead. What's the pattern here? What determines who actually pays the price? Hamdaniyah murder. April 26, 2006, Iraq. Marines went looking for a suspected insurgent in Hamdaniyah village. Couldn't find him anywhere. So they made a decision that reveals everything wrong with the system. They just grabbed someone else instead. Any Iraqi would do. They found Hashim Ibrahim Awad, known to locals as a harmless man, disabled, walked with a metal rod surgically implanted in his leg, poor eyesight, couldn't see well. Sleeping peacefully in his house when they kicked in the door. They dragged him out of bed away from his terrified family. But first, they stole a shovel and AK-47 from a neighbor's yard to use as props for their staged scene. Tied his hands behind his back with flex cuffs, forced him to walk to a hole in the road despite his disability, shot him dead right there, fired the stolen gun into the air to fake a battle, make it sound like combat, untied his hands to stage the scene, planted the shovel and rifle next to his body carefully, filed a false report claiming they'd killed a terrorist caught planting a roadside bomb. Perfect cover story. His family found him the next morning in the harsh daylight, shot in the mouth, face so beaten and swollen from the violence that they almost couldn't recognize him. 7 Marines and 1 Navy medic got charged with murder and kidnapping eventually. However, the justice system completely struggled to hold them accountable properly. Most made deals to testify against each other in exchange for much lighter sentences. Classic prisoner's dilemma. The leader got convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years, but that conviction got overturned on a legal technicality. Retried, convicted again, and the jury somehow decided he didn't need to serve any more time. He walked free. A disabled man murdered in cold blood, scene staged to frame him as a terrorist. Basically, nobody paid any real price. Gorla Massacre. October 20th, 1944. Milan, Italy. Children running downstairs toward the air raid shelter. Sirens wailing. Bombs falling across the city. Then one hits their school directly. 184 children dead instantly, buried under rubble. The 451st Bombing Group had a terrible, well-documented record. They'd already accidentally bombed the wrong town earlier in the war, hitting Venafro by mistake, killing 40 Italian civilians and 17 Allied soldiers in friendly fire. Got investigated, got criticized harshly. But nobody was punished because commanders feared it would hurt morale in future operations, so they kept flying missions. That morning, 111 American bombers took off from bases in southern Italy. 2 groups hit their assigned targets correctly without incident. Then came the 451st's turn to prove themselves. They were supposed to hit the Breda factory, an industrial military target. Lead plane made a fatal navigation error, turned right instead of left. One simple mistake sent all the bombers directly over densely populated residential neighborhoods instead. Realized they couldn't reach the factory from their position, still dropped their bombs anyway rather than abort, ordered everyone else to do the same. All bombs from the second wave fell on civilian areas filled with families. 614 civilians dead in minutes. 184 were kids packed into Francesco Crispi Primary School seeking shelter. Air raid sirens had sounded earlier, but many didn't have enough time to reach the shelters before the bombs hit. After the bombing, there was internal criticism within military command, but no real consequences followed. Nobody was punished or held accountable. The kids became known as the Little Martyrs of Gorla. Fascist authorities used the tragedy for propaganda purposes, calling the Allies murderers of children in newspapers. Allied command quietly moved on. Just another mission. Just another day. 2 Bo killings. January 31st. Marines from Company H approached Thuy Bo village, Vietnam. Got hit with unexpectedly heavy fire from multiple positions. Pinned down by a .50 caliber machine gun. Stayed under fire all night long. Next morning at first light, pushed into the village with reinforcements. What happened next depends entirely on who you ask. And that's the problem. Vietnamese sources say it was a massacre, pure and simple. A village memorial lists 145 civilians killed, mostly women, children, elderly men who couldn't fight. U.S. Sources tell a different story, claiming 22 civilians died during 2 days of intense combat. 5 Marines dead, 26 wounded, 101 Viet Cong killed in battle. Captain Edward Banks said it was impossible to tell enemy from friend in the chaos. Everyone looked the same. Villagers sometimes watched booby traps explode without warning Marines, making them complicit. Called it a legitimate search and destroy operation and denied any massacre occurred. Insisted the Viet Cong used human shields deliberately. Some Marines remembered things very differently from their captain. Jack Hill said the death toll was ridiculous for a village they'd thought was friendly. Described throwing grenades into underground bunkers to force people out into the open. Explained that the language barrier and constant pressure of war played a role in those violent choices. Villagers told yet another version entirely. A 14-year-old survivor said jets and artillery struck first. Then troops came in, asked if people were Viet Cong, and shot them regardless of answers. Others said only women, children, and old men were present. Cut down by short bursts of gunfire while eating breakfast or pressing sugarcane. One woman said a grenade thrown into her house killed 10 family members instantly, and that soldiers fired again into the corpses to make sure everyone was dead. Numbers remain bitterly disputed to this day. Truth lost forever in the fog of war. Biscari Massacre. July 14th, 1943. Sicily. 2 separate incidents. Same day, same pattern. 73 prisoners of war executed in cold blood. Sergeant Horace West was ordered to take a group of prisoners to the rear for processing. Instead, he marched them about a mile away from everyone else and stopped. Borrowed a Tommy gun from another soldier. Told other guards to turn away if they didn't want to watch what he was about to do. Opened fire on the unarmed men standing there. Shot them through the heart methodically. Gun ran empty after the first magazine. Reloaded calmly. Walked among the bodies, shooting wounded men, still moving to make absolutely sure they were all dead. 37 bodies left lying on the ground in pools of blood. Later that same day, Captain John Compton was furious because snipers had been picking off his men. When troops captured a group of 36 Italians hiding in a ditch trying to surrender, they brought them to the captain for orders. Prisoners begged for their lives on their knees. Compton gave a direct order to his firing squad. "I don't want anyone left standing when this is over." Prisoners tried to run in panic. Americans opened fire and killed them all in seconds. General Patton initially tried covering it up when the news reached top commanders. Wrote in his personal diary that they should just lie, say the men were snipers killed in combat to avoid a major scandal. Other officers with integrity refused to stay silent about war crimes. Once Patton learned the full details, that prisoners had offered no provocation and were essentially being slaughtered, he said, "Try those bastards." Sergeant convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Captain found not guilty, claiming he was just following orders from above. Here's the shocking kicker, though the sergeant never actually served his life sentence at all. After the noise died down and attention moved elsewhere, the army quietly released him just a year later. Allowed him to return to active duty, eventually gave him an honorable discharge. Justice completely abandoned. Dachau Liberation Reprisals. April 29, 1945. American soldiers reached Dachau concentration camp and walked into absolute hell. Train cars, sitting on tracks full of thousands of corpses, bodies stacked from the floor to the ceiling like cordwood. Survivors who were walking skeletons, starving and barely alive. Days before liberation, guards had forced thousands of prisoners on brutal death marches. American soldiers were shocked beyond words and furious beyond reason. Discipline completely collapsed in that moment. They started killing SS guards on sight. Liberated prisoners, barely able to stand, joined in with whatever strength they had left. Historians estimate between 35 and 50 guards died that day in the chaos. Colonel Felix Sparks, an American commander, saw a machine gunner open fire on surrendered prisoners standing with hands up, ran over, and physically stopped him by kicking the gun away. But about a dozen men were already dead on the ground. Other guards were shot near walls and guard towers without any trial or process. Prisoners took their own revenge with brutal efficiency. Swarmed the guards, beating them with shovels, sticks, and their bare fists until dead, stomped them to death. American soldiers stood nearby and watched, deliberately looking the other way. Nobody intervened. The U.S. Army actually investigated these killings immediately, which is notable. A detailed report confirmed that surrendered guards had been shot and that wounded men were left without medical care to die slowly. Serious charges were considered even against commanding officers. However, General George Patton, the same general from the Biscari massacre, dismissed the entire case without hesitation. The legal review argued that because the horrors discovered at Dachau were so extreme and unprecedented, it was unjust to punish the soldiers for snapping under those circumstances. In the end, no one was ever punished for the killings. The guards had facilitated genocide, and rough justice was served outside the law. These 9 incidents spanned decades and wars across the globe. Different circumstances, different reasons, different outcomes every time. But the pattern's there if you look closely enough. Discipline breaks down under pressure. Accountability vanishes into bureaucracy. Victims get forgotten by history. Some perpetrators got life sentences. Some got 10 years with parole. Some got absolutely nothing at all. And the question nobody wants to answer, what really determines who actually pays for their crimes?